I hadn't planned on visiting my son's house that Thanksgiving. Truthfully, I hadn't been invited. Over the past few years, my son and I had grown distant. We didn't fight, but there was always tension when we spoke, like unspoken words weighing down every conversation. Still, I decided to make the drive across town. Family is family, and Thanksgiving is supposed to bring people together. The streets were icy that morning, the air sharp enough to sting my skin through my coat. I parked near the curb, tightened my scarf, and walked toward my son's house. That's when I saw him, my grandson. A little boy, no more than 8 years old, standing on the sidewalk in nothing but a thin t-shirt and shorts. His lips were trembling, his small hands pressed against his arms as he shivered violently. My heart nearly stopped. It was barely 5 degrees outside, weather no child should ever be exposed to. "Tommy?" I rushed over, placing my coat around his shoulders. "What on earth are you doing out here?" He looked up at me, his eyes glassy from the cold. "Grandpa, they told me to wait outside until dinner's ready." I froze. Wait outside? In this weather? My pulse quickened as anger boiled in my chest. I held him close, trying to warm his tiny body, and glanced at the windows of the house. Warm light spilled out, and through the curtains, I could see shadows moving inside. The family, his parents, his cousins, everyone were laughing, eating, celebrating. Meanwhile, my grandson had been left outside like an unwanted guest. I could barely believe what I was seeing. My own son, my flesh and blood, allowing his child to suffer in the freezing cold while he feasted at a table of warmth and comfort? I stood there for a moment, trying to calm myself, but my blood was pounding in my ears. Something snapped inside me. I picked up Tommy in my arms, marched up to the door, and with one swift motion, I kicked it open. The door slammed against the wall, silencing the room instantly. Forks clattered onto plates, and everyone turned to stare. My grandson was shivering in my arms, wrapped in my coat. Their laughter vanished. Their smiles dropped. And then, with all the fury I've been holding back for years, I said 6 words that made their faces go white. The room fell silent as the door slammed shut behind me. The smell of roasted turkey and sweet cranberry sauce filled the air, but all I could feel was the icy chill still clinging to my grandson's body. Everyone stared at me in shock. My son, his wife, her relatives, even the younger kids who had been laughing moments earlier. I looked straight at my son, holding Tommy close to my chest, and I said 6 words, loud and clear. "Why is my grandson outside freezing?" You could have heard a pin drop. My son's face drained of color, his fork still frozen in midair. My daughter-in-law shifted uncomfortably in her chair, avoiding my eyes. No one spoke. I stepped further into the dining room, my boots leaving wet marks on the polished floor. "Do you realize it's 5 degrees out there? 5! This boy could have gotten frostbite or worse." My voice trembled with both rage and heartbreak. Finally, my son stood up. His voice was shaky, defensive. "Dad, it's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like? Your child is outside, shivering like an abandoned dog, while you sit here stuffing your face with turkey and wine." Tommy buried his head against my shoulder. I could feel his little body trembling, not just from the cold anymore, but from fear. He didn't want to be here, and in that moment, I realized this wasn't the first time he'd been treated this way. My daughter-in-law finally spoke, her tone sharp. "He was misbehaving. He wouldn't stop bothering the other kids. We told him to cool off outside for a while." I turned on her, my eyes blazing. "Cool off? Cool off? Do you even understand what could have happened to him? A child doesn't cool off in freezing weather. He dies in it." The family shifted uncomfortably. No one dared to defend her words. My son rubbed his forehead, ashamed, but still silent. I placed Tommy gently in a chair near the fireplace and wrapped a blanket around him. Then I turned back to the table. "If this is how you treat your children, If this is what you call discipline, then you've forgotten what it means to be a parent. Shame on every single one of you for sitting here in comfort while he suffered outside." No one said a word. The clinking of glasses, the laughter, the warmth, it was all gone. The room was as cold as the air outside. The fire crackled faintly in the corner as I tucked the blanket tighter around Tommy. His small fingers clutched at my sleeve, refusing to let go. I gave him a reassuring pat, then turned back to face the table. Everyone was still frozen in silence. My son's wife looked like she was about to protest again, but one sharp glance from me kept her quiet. My son sank back into his chair, staring at his plate as though the golden brown turkey might hold the answers he didn't want to give. "Do you know what I see here?" I asked, my voice low but steady. A family gathered around the feast, pretending to celebrate gratitude and love, while the youngest among you is left to suffer. Is this what Thanksgiving means to you now? My words hit like stones. I could see the guilt crawling across their faces, though no one dared to respond. I took a step closer to the table, my anger simmering but controlled. "When I raised you," I said, fixing my eyes on my son, "I didn't have much, but I swore I'd never let you feel hunger or cold or loneliness under my roof. And now, I walk in and find your son, my grandson, outside in the freezing dark. You've broken something far more important than tradition, son. You've broken trust." My son finally lifted his eyes to meet mine. His lips trembled like he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. The weight of the truth pinned them down. I glanced around the table. "And the rest of you? Every one of you sat here knowing he was outside. Not one of you stood up to bring him in. What does that say about you?" The cousins looked down at their plates. An aunt cleared her throat nervously. My daughter-in-law bit her lip but kept silent this time. The shame in the room was thick enough to choke on. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This boy deserves better. Better than this table. Better than this silence. If none of you can see that, then you don't deserve to sit here pretending to be a family. With that, I pulled out a chair at the head of the table and sat down, Tommy still bundled in the blanket, his small body pressed against me. "He'll eat with me," I said firmly, "and he'll never be left out again, not while I'm around." The silence stretched long, but this time it wasn't comfortable. My son looked as though he wanted to crawl out of his own skin. My daughter-in-law's face was pale, her eyes darted from me to the boy. No one touched their food. For the first time in years, I felt like the father again, the one who had the final word, and I wasn't about to let this moment pass without making it clear things would change. The room stayed silent, except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. My words lingered in the air like smoke, heavy and suffocating. Everyone shifted uncomfortably, but no one dared lift their fork. Tommy leaned against me, his breathing finally slowing as the warmth of the blanket seeped into his body. I stroked his hair, whispering softly, "You're safe now, grandson. You're safe with me." Finally, my son stood up. His face was pale, but his voice cracked with guilt. "Dad, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought he'd just wait a few minutes. I didn't realize how cold it was." I slammed my hand on the table so hard the glasses rattled. "You didn't realize?" I growled. "You're his father. It's your job to realize. It's your job to protect them no matter what. A father doesn't forget. A father doesn't ignore." My son flinched. The whole family sat frozen. I leaned forward, staring him down. "Do you know what it feels like to be abandoned? To be pushed aside as if you don't matter? I swore you'd never feel that when you were a boy. And yet, here you are, doing the very thing I protected you from. What happened to you, son?" His eyes glistened, and for the first time, he didn't look like a grown man. He looked like the little boy I once raised, ashamed and lost. I don't know," he whispered. "Work, stress, arguments at home. I've been taking it out on him, on my own son. I didn't even see it until now. Dad, I messed up. My heart ached at those words. Anger still burned in me, but beneath it was sorrow. I took a slow breath. You're right. You messed up badly, but recognizing it is only the first step. What matters now is whether you'll change. Tommy looked up at his father with wide, uncertain eyes. The boy wanted love, wanted safety, but there was fear too. Fear that this wasn't the first time, and maybe not the last. I pulled the boy closer and looked my son dead in the eye. From this day forward, you don't just answer to yourself. You answer to me. If I ever find them out in the cold again, if I ever find them treated like this, I swear I'll take them out of this house myself, and I won't look back. Gasps rippled around the table. My daughter-in-law looked horrified, but she stayed silent. My son's head dropped into his hands. He didn't argue. He didn't deny it. He just sat there, broken by the truth. Tommy squeezed my hand tighter. For the first time that night, I felt him relax. Not because the danger was gone, but because someone had finally stood up for him. I glanced at the untouched turkey, the uneaten pies, the bowls of stuffing and potatoes. You all sit here giving thanks for blessings you don't even recognize. This boy is the greatest blessing you'll ever have, and you left him in the cold. The shame in the room was crushing. No one could look me in the eye. But I didn't care. Tonight wasn't about them. Tonight was about Tommy. The tension in that dining room was unlike anything I had ever felt before. The smell of roasted turkey, the flickering candles, the polished silverware, everything that was supposed to feel warm and festive now felt cold and hollow. I could see Tommy's eyes darting around, unsure of what would happen next. His small hand gripped mine like it was the only anchor he had in the storm. I wasn't going to let go. Not now, not ever. My son still had his head in his hands. His shoulders shook, and for a moment I thought he might cry. His wife sat stiffly in her chair, her lips pressed into a thin line. I knew she was angry, angry that I had barged in, angry that I had called them out in front of everyone. But I didn't care about her pride. I cared about the little boy who had nearly frozen outside. I cleared my throat and said, "This isn't just about tonight. This is about the kind of man my grandson will grow up to be. Do you want him to remember holidays as nights of warmth and love, or nights where he was cast out in the cold while everyone else laughed?" The question cut through the silence. Some of the relatives shifted uncomfortably. A cousin looked down at her lap. Another reached for his glass but stopped, realizing it wasn't the time. My son slowly lifted his head. His eyes were red, his voice raw. "You're right, Dad. You're right about all of it. I've been failing him, failing my own boy." I didn't let up. "Then don't just say the words. Prove it. From this day forward, you change how you treat him. You put him first. No excuses, no shortcuts. A father doesn't get second chances when it comes to protecting his child. He either does it or he loses him." Tommy's eyes flicked toward his father, searching for something, maybe hope. My son swallowed hard and nodded. "I'll do better, I swear it." But I wasn't satisfied with just words. I turned my gaze to my daughters-in-law. "And you're his mother. If you can't defend your child, then what are you doing at this table? You should be the first one protecting him, not the one sending him into the cold." Her face flushed and she looked away. She didn't speak, but the silence was enough. Everyone in the room knew she had no defense. I leaned back in my chair, keeping Tommy close. My voice softened, but it carried more weight than ever. I didn't come here tonight to cause a scene. I came because I wanted to see my family. But what I saw instead was a boy nearly abandoned by the people who should love him most. That ends tonight. From this day forward, things will be different, or I'll make sure they are. The fire popped in the hearth, sending sparks into the air. No one dared to touch their food. The feast meant nothing now. The only thing that mattered was the boy wrapped in my coat, his small frame pressed against me. I kissed the top of his head and whispered so only he could hear. "You're not alone anymore, Tommy. Grandpa's here, always." He nodded softly, finally closing his eyes, safe in my arms. And as the family sat in stunned silence, I knew this was just the beginning. The air inside that dining room felt heavy, almost suffocating. No one touched their plates. The laughter and chatter that had filled the house just minutes earlier were gone, swallowed up by the weight of truth. I kept Tommy close, his little body warm under my coat. Every so often, I could feel him tremble, like he was afraid it might all happen again, that someone would drag him back out into the cold. I rubbed his back gently, whispering, "Not anymore, son, not anymore." Finally, one of the aunts spoke up, her voice shaky. "He's right. We all should have said something. We all saw Tommy outside through the window. None of us did a thing." Her words hit the table like a hammer. Heads turned toward her, some glaring, some ashamed. She lowered her eyes, embarrassed, but I nodded. "At least you admit it," I said firmly. "That's the first step. But admitting isn't enough. What matters is that it never happens again." I looked around the table, at every face. You all call yourselves family, yet you sat here and let a child freeze. Let me tell you something. Family isn't defined by who sits at the table. It's defined by who you'd never leave out in the cold. My words settled into the silence. I could see the discomfort, the cousins shifting in their chairs, my daughter-in-law staring at her lap, my son wiping his face with the back of his hand. But Tommy looked up at me with wide eyes. For the first time that night, there was a spark in them, a spark of hope. I placed my hand on the table, my voice steady. "This holiday isn't about turkey or pie or wine. It's about gratitude. And if you can't even show gratitude for the greatest gift you've been given, a child, then you don't deserve to celebrate at all." My son swallowed hard. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. "Dad, you're right. I don't deserve him, but I want to try again. I want to be better. For him." Tommy's small fingers tightened around mine. I could feel his hesitation, his doubt. He wanted to believe, but he'd been hurt too many times already. I squeezed his hand, giving him strength. "Trying isn't enough," I told my son, my voice sharp. "Change is what matters. If you mean what you say, then prove it, not with promises, but with actions, starting now." The room grew quiet again. Everyone knew this wasn't just a lecture. It was a turning point. Something had shifted, and there was no going back. I looked at the boy in my arms and then back at the family. From this day forward, Tommy will never eat outside while you feast inside. He'll never be cast out while you pretend to be thankful. Because if you can't treat him with the love he deserves, then you don't deserve to call yourselves family. The fire crackled, the candles flickered, and the house was silent. I held Tommy tighter, my decision already made. The silence in the room grew so heavy, it was almost unbearable. The candles on the table flickered as though the house itself was holding its breath. I glanced at each face again. My son, pale and broken, my daughter-in-law, rigid with shame, the relatives, all quiet, avoiding my gaze. And then I looked at Tommy, still clutching my coat, his wide eyes searching for safety. I stood slowly, lifting Tommy into my arms. "You know what hurts the most," I said, my voice carrying through the room. "It's not the cold outside. It's not the icy wind. What hurts the most is knowing the people you trust the most can turn their backs on you." Tommy's head rested against my chest. I could feel his small heartbeat racing. He was listening to every word. I pointed toward the table. "This feast, this turkey, this wine, this laughter, it's worthless if it comes at the cost of cruelty. Do you all understand? A child is not a burden. A child is not a nuisance to be shoved aside. He is the very reason this table exists. Without him, without the next generation, you have nothing to be thankful for. The relatives shifted uncomfortably, some with tears in their eyes. My son's lips quivered as though he wanted to respond, but no sound came. My daughter-in-law finally muttered, I didn't realize it would be so dangerous. I turned on her sharply. A mother should always realize you don't send your child into the cold to teach a lesson. You guide him, you comfort him, you show him love. If you can't do that, then you need to take a long, hard look at yourself and ask if you deserve to be called a mother. Her eyes welled up, but I didn't stop. And you, I turned to my son. You say you'll do better, prove it. Don't just speak, act. Show him every day that he matters more than your pride, more than your stress, more than your dinner table. Tommy shifted slightly in my arms, peeking up at his father. His small voice, trembling but clear, finally broke the silence. Dad, why didn't you want me inside? The words cut through me like a knife. My son staggered back as if he'd been punched. He reached out toward his boy, his voice breaking. Tommy, it wasn't that I didn't want you inside. I was wrong. I thought I was teaching you discipline, but I was only hurting you. I'm so sorry, son. Tears slipped down Tommy's cheeks. He buried his face against me, too scared to move toward his father just yet. My arms tightened around him protectively. I faced the table once more. This boy deserves warmth. He deserves love. And if you all can't give it to him, then I will. But I promise you this, never again will he stand in the cold while the rest of you celebrate. The fire popped loudly, almost like punctuation to my words. And in that moment, the entire family knew this Thanksgiving had changed everything.
The room felt like it had frozen in time. The turkey was getting cold, the mashed potatoes untouched, but nobody moved a muscle. All eyes were on the little boy in my arms, the boy who had just spoken the question everyone was too afraid to ask. My son stood there, trembling, his hands half raised toward Tommy. "Son," he whispered, his voice thick with regret, "I never meant to push you away. I thought I was teaching you to behave, but I see now I was wrong, so wrong." Tommy peeked at him, his big brown eyes full of hurt. "You didn't want me, Dad," he said softly, his voice shaking. "Everyone else was eating. I was out there alone. I thought, maybe you didn't love me anymore." The words hit my son like a hammer. He staggered back a step, clutching his chest as if the air had been knocked out of him. His wife gasped quietly, covering her mouth with her hand. The cousins, the aunts, the uncles, everyone looked down, shame filling the room like smoke. I held Tommy tighter, glaring at my son. "Do you hear him? Do you finally understand the damage you've done? This isn't just about tonight. This is about years of small wounds, small moments where you chose silence, anger, or pride over love. And now your child doubts your love for him. That is the deepest wound of all." My son's face crumpled. He dropped to his knees, right there on the dining room floor. Streams of tears flowed down his cheeks. "Tommy," he begged, "I love you more than anything in this world. I made a terrible mistake. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you. Give me a chance to prove it." Tommy's small body trembled in my arms. He looked at me, then back at his father. His lips parted as though he wanted to say something, but no words came. Instead, he buried his face back against my chest. The silence was deafening. I stared down at my son. "Love isn't words," I said firmly. "Love is action. Tonight you showed him neglect. If you want to change that, then you'll need to prove it every single day. No excuses, no forgetting, No second chances. You either fight for your son's trust or you lose it forever. The entire family sat in stunned silence. Some wiped away tears. Others shifted uncomfortably, ashamed that they hadn't stepped in sooner. Finally, my daughter-in-law spoke, her voice cracking. "He's right. We failed him. I failed him. Tommy, I'm so sorry." But Tommy didn't answer. He stayed pressed against me, clinging like I was the only safe harbor he had left. And in that moment, I realized something. Tonight wasn't just about exposing the family's neglect. It was about building a promise that Tommy would never, ever feel abandoned again. I kissed the top of his head. "Don't worry, grandson. Grandpa's not going anywhere."
The silence was crushing. Tommy's little body was still tucked against me, his small hands holding onto my shirt as if I might disappear. I could feel the weight of everyone's guilt pressing down on the room, but especially on my son. He was still on his knees, tears streaming down his face, begging silently for forgiveness that hadn't yet come. I looked down at him, my voice steady. "You've spoken your regret, but words don't heal wounds. Actions do. And right now, this boy doesn't need promises. He needs proof." My son nodded desperately. "I'll do whatever it takes. I'll spend the rest of my life proving it." Tommy shifted slightly in my arms. His voice was small, shaky. "But what if you forget again, Dad? What if you don't want me next time?" The words shattered what was left of my son's pride. He reached forward, his hands trembling. "Then I'll remind myself every single day. I'll never let that thought cross your mind again, son. You are my heart. You are my family. I'll never put you out in the cold again, not ever." I studied his face, searching for sincerity. For once, I saw the boy I had raised. A boy who had made mistakes, yes, but also a man who wanted desperately to make them right. Slowly, I lowered Tommy to the ground. He hesitated, clutching my hand tightly. "Grandpa," he whispered, his eyes full of uncertainty. I leaned down, kissing his forehead. "It's your choice, grandson. If you want to take a step toward your father, I'll be right here. I won't let you fall." Tommy's small feet shuffled across the floor. My son stayed on his knees, his arms open, not daring to move closer. Finally, Tommy stepped into his embrace. My son broke down completely, hugging his boy as though he would never let go again. Both of them sobbed, the father with guilt, the son with relief. The family watched in silence, some wiping their eyes. The coldness that had once filled the room began to thaw. But I raised my hand, cutting through the moment. "This is a beginning," I said firmly, "not an ending. Love is not a holiday ritual. It's not one day a year. It's every single day. If you want this family to heal, then let tonight be the last night a child ever feels unwanted." Everyone nodded, subdued. My words weren't just for my son, they were for all of them. I sat back down, pulling Tommy beside me. For the first time, the boy smiled faintly, his eyes brighter than before. The candles had burned low, the turkey sat half-eaten, but something far greater had been served that night. Truth. Change. A chance for healing. Tommy sat beside me, still wrapped in my coat, but now his hand rested inside his father's. The boy wasn't ready to fully trust yet, but it was a start. His father squeezed that hand gently, as though promising with every heartbeat that he'd never let go again. I raised my glass of water. Not wine, not champagne, just water. "This," I said, my voice strong, "is what Thanksgiving is meant to be. Not food, not decorations, but gratitude for the people we love, and the courage to love them better." The family bowed their heads. For once, there were no excuses, no pride, no hollow words. Only a heavy silence of reflection and change. I looked around the table. I want every one of you to remember what happened tonight. Not as a shameful secret, but as a lesson. If ever you see a child, any child, being pushed aside, speak up. Don't sit in silence again, because silence is just as cruel as action. Tommy looked up at me, his eyes wide. Grandpa, will you always be here? I leaned down, pressing my forehead against his. Always, my boy. Even when I'm not here in person, my love will never leave you. You'll never be alone again. Tears shimmered in his eyes, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from hope. Finally, for the first time that night, the family reached for their food again. But it wasn't the same. Every bite was heavier, every laugh softer, every smile humbler. Because now they understood. That Thanksgiving would be remembered, not for the turkey, not for the pies, but for the night an old man burst through a door and reminded a family what love really means. And as I held my grandson close, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would never stand in the cold again.